He was a genius with words, but he was unhappy all his life. All the photographs of him, and I've seen many, show him stern and sombre, even as a child. He was a famous international playwright, but he was depressed, angry with life. All these days, from the age of 35, he was wealthy, but it gave him no joy. You know what his last words were? Here are his last words. Born in a hotel room, died in a hotel room. I knew it, and it was true. Eugene O'Neill was born in a hotel room, and he did die in a hotel room. One of the most unhappy yet talented man who'd ever lived. His father was James O'Neill, who came from Britain, from Ireland, at the age of 8, steerage. At 21, he became an actor, and 6,000 times he played the Count of Monte Cristo. He was a good man, good father, good husband. But Eugene was all the time travelling from town to town as his father played the Count of Monte Cristo. The mother nursed him in the wings of the theatre. His older brother was Jamie, a ne'er-do-well, who early in life introduced Eugene to prostitutes. He went to Roman Catholic schools in New York, Stanford. Ultimately, he spent a year at Princeton, and he also went to Harvard. Another student said, describing Eugene, he was a cynical bastard. He married before he was 21, but almost immediately he left his wife for Honduras to search for gold. He didn't find gold, but he did find malaria. But he got a background for his play, The Emperor Jones, where Paul Robeson figured, that wonderful African-American. When he came back, his wife had borne him a child, Eugene II, who would become an alcoholic and who would suicide. He spent some years at sea, depressed and immersed in alcohol. The sailors weren't interested in marriage. They were interested in women. Their ideals were drink and dreams. But he spent several years at sea, and that gave a basis for many of his plays. But he abandoned his second wife, Agnes Bolton, and her children for a third woman. Agnes had had 2 children, one called Shane, who would become a drug addict, and who would suicide by throwing himself outside a window of a very high building. Her other child was quite different, Una, a lovely, modest woman who at 18 married Charlie Chaplin, who was 54, and she bore him 8 children. Her father disowned her, as he also disowned Shane. And so he married Carlotta Monterey, the stage name of one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. She was married to Ralph Martin. He suicided after she left him for Eugene O'Neill. His plays are all hot with violence and death. He is an angry man. In one play there are 100 pages of outpouring of hatred, particularly against women. and America and religion. He joined up with a group called Provincetown Players, who were determined to bring back realism instead of the anemic plays of the 19th century. And they established 1,900 little theatres all around America. And Eugene was a chief dramatist and actor. He became the most famous playwright in America. He said, I'm giving them realism, suffering, pain, anger, violence, death. But Eugene, were there no sunny days in your life? Did you never see a sunrise or a sunset? Did you never learn what joy means? What unselfish love is like? Friendship? Have you never heard music that lifted you up to the skies? Or poetry that inspired you? Surely, Eugene, there's more to realism than suffering, pain and death. Have you never had a delicious meal in your life? Most people have at least one delicious meal a day, 365 days a year, for 50, 60, 70 or 80 years. Your idea of realism, Eugene, is very incomplete. No wonder you were so miserable. No wonder you were a drunkard. You see, misery often leads to alcoholism. I'd like to give you a list of people who died early because of alcohol, who are famous. Here are a few of them. George Best died at 59. Richard Burton died at 58. Truman Capote, 58. W.C. Fields at 66. All these died from alcohol. F. Scott Fitzgerald, 44. Errol Flynn, 50. O. Henry, the great short story writer, 47. William Holden, you know his movies, 63. Veronica Lake, beautiful hairdo, 50. Joseph McCarthy, the communist hater, he died at 48. Dylan Thomas, 39. James Thurber, 66. John Barrymore, that handsome idol of Hollywood, 62. Now, that's not a complete list. That's just some people from Europe and America. Eugene was well-known alcoholic. He ultimately gave it up because he had so many physical and nervous problems. He is an example of millions who, finding life hard, seek help in drugs or alcohol and destroy themselves. This man, Eugene, often visited Greenwich Village, where he had friendships with the radicals, such as John Reed, the famous journalist who went to Russia at the time of revolution, and Eugene had an affair with John's wife, Louise. You see, Eugene gave up Christianity. He gave up the morality of Christianity. He adopted the pessimism of Schopenhauer. You remember that philosopher? Found on a park seat by the man in charge of the park. Park seat attendant said, "Who are you?" Schopenhauer said, "I wish to God I knew." Well, Eugene adopted the pessimism of Schopenhauer, and he adopted the lack of morality of Friedrich Nietzsche, who preached that God is dead, long live Superman, adopted by Adolf Hitler. He also believed that if God was dead, anything was permitted. Every human impulse was okay. Beyond reproach, he put that in one of his plays. In other words, he came to the place where there was no evil. Well, it's a bit hard to believe that if someone slaps you in the face or steals your pocketbook or your car. Only an idiot or a man who wants to believe it thinks there's no evil. But if you get rid of God, there is no good and there is no evil. So his third wife was Carlotta Monterey, but they had fights. His second wife, Eugene, had sometimes attacked with his fists, but to his credit, he suffered from remorse afterwards. When his brother and he learnt their father had died, they went on a drinking spree for days. They had no discipline. Genius, yes. Money, yes. But no happiness, no God. Carlotta had a nervous breakdown in 1943. When she recovered, she was mentally unbalanced, went to a mental hospital. Eugene had a paralytic stroke the same year, in 1943. For 10 years he couldn't write. At the end of 10 years, he died. 10 years of emptiness. Too much alcohol. No God. No joy. May I say to you today, you may not have genius with words like Eugene O'Neill, but you can respond to the words of a greater genius, the greatest genius who ever lived. You can respond to these words. Come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Believe it, receive it, and everlasting joy is yours.